from Tony. Is Notre Dame's biggest roadblock to an undefeated season Florida State? Do the Irish have the best defense in the nation? Best defense in the nation, I think you're going to get pushback there from Ohio State, who brings almost everybody back, who probably had a better defense than Notre Dame last year. Michigan, they don't bring everybody back, but they bring a lot back. They're gonna push back on that. Iowa will push back on that too, but we'll probably just make fun of Iowa's offense. But is Notre Dame's defense one of the best in the nation? Yeah, it sure is. Lots of questions answered already on that defense. I mean, think of it. So in the secondary, you've got Xavier Watts at safety, one of the best in the country. Benjamin Morrison, another guy who made one of me and Cody's ultimate college football 2024 teams. Also Christian Gray, who proved himself as a young player. Defensive tackles, Howard Cross the third and Riley Mills. Like, they're set there. RJ Oben coming off the edge. Jack Kaiser at linebacker. This is a very experienced defense. They'll have to plug in a few new parts, but they should be very confident. So let's talk about the schedule. Because when you see undefeated in Tony's question, you're like, whoa, 12-0, that is a bold statement. Is it, though? Is it that bold? I'm gonna go do a little old school Phil Steele on you here, because I always enjoyed how Phil would break down a schedule. Because one of the first things he looks at is, how many games are you going to be favored in this season? If the season started right now, how many games would you be favored in? And so I went to S&P Plus. Our friend Bill Connolly over at ESPN does S&P Plus. And this is the most recent one that's been out. There's another update coming now that the rosters are all set. But I imagine the teams at the top, which didn't do a lot in the spring portal, probably not changing very much. So I think we can pretty safely work off of this one. It's a predictive model. So it is kind of like a Vegas power ranking, where they would use, they would use it basically to set the line in games. So Notre Dame is number 9 in S&P Plus. The next closest teams to Notre Dame that are on Notre Dame's schedule are Florida State and Texas A&M. Florida State is 12, Texas A&M is 13. Texas A&M is at Kyle Field. So remember, we're gonna probably give them 3 points in the spread for home field advantage. So that's probably a slight Notre Dame favorite or a pick 'em. Florida State, obviously, that's later in the season. A lot can change between now and then, but I believe Notre Dame as the home team in this, with the information we have now, will be a slight favorite. They're favored in every other game. Every other game. So they probably favorites as we start the season right now in 12 of their 12 games. So yeah, undefeated is definitely on the table. Is it easy? No. No undefeated season is ever easy, no matter what your schedule looks like. But this particular Notre Dame schedule does look like it is workable. This Notre Dame schedule looks like you can navigate it. Now, we talked to Tyler Horka from blueandgold.com, and he pointed out, because I've always said in this version of the playoff, which we've not actually seen one yet, but my thinking is that if Notre Dame goes 10-2 in any season in this version of the playoff, they get in the playoff. Tyler thinks with this schedule, you might have to go 11-1, just because it's not on paper right now as strong of a schedule. I think you do have to go 11-1 probably as you look at it now. Although we'll see again, because some of these teams could be better. But here's the thing: if you could beat Texas A&M, that gives you the mulligan against Florida State. Louisville is a team that beat Notre Dame last year, but you look at the way that game falls, and I think Louisville could be pretty good. You know, I've said this multiple times, like Tyler Shook playing for Jeff Brom feels like a good marriage, and Tyler Shook, if he could ever stay healthy for an entire season, could be a really, really good quarterback. You saw Louisville be ahead of schedule last year. Louisville's schedule is considerably tougher this year. So I don't know if Louisville will actually have as good of a record as they had last year, but they could have as good of a team. Now, that team beat Notre Dame because Notre Dame was at the end of a pretty rough slog of games that had included, the Ohio State game, the Duke game that was a very tough road game at night. And then you go to Louisville, and Louisville was good. I mean, Louisville won, got the ACC championship game. But where that falls in the schedule this year, it does not seem as daunting. It's after Miami of Ohio. It's at Notre Dame. One I will throw out there, Georgia Tech. It's a neutral site game, but not really. It's at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, which is 2 miles from Georgia Tech's campus. Though I will say that's probably going to be a 50-50 crowd. But I think Brent Key's done a really good job at Georgia Tech. Buster Faulkner, one of the more hot rising star commodities as an offensive coordinator. Haynes King really developed well last year after transferring from Texas A&M at quarterback. That could be a tough one. But you look at the Florida State game, one, get them in South Bend. We don't know what Florida State's going to be. My suspicion is they'll be pretty good. Like DJ Uiagalelei takes over at quarterback. It's going to be a lot of new people. But they attack the transfer portal in a similar fashion and maybe got a little better caliber of transfer this offseason than they have in the previous ones. Plus, their high school recruiting has improved each year as they've won more. So I think Florida State, we can pretty safely assume, having watched Mike Norvell operate for the last few years, they're going to be pretty good. But like you go, Notre Dame has to play Navy before Florida State, but not right before Florida State. There's a weekend between those games. So remember, my friend Bruce Feldman wrote about this years ago, and it's a great theory, the body blow theory. Basically, when you play a triple option team, that next week you are in danger because your linemen are beaten up. It takes a different toll. But because there's a week in between, I don't think that applies either. So can Notre Dame go undefeated? Yeah, absolutely. Notre Dame is capable of going undefeated. I don't think A&M's a gimme. Louisville is going to be tough. Georgia Tech, obviously Florida State. The other one I will point out, and this is a team that we're not talking about very much right now. It's strange because we talked about them so much each of the last 2 years, is USC. We are assuming USC is going to go into the Big Ten and be just okay. We are assuming that USC is not going to be a challenge for Notre Dame when they play them at the end of the season. We don't know that. We do not know that. Lincoln Riley has always had good offenses. They just revamped their defensive staff. D'Anton Lynn comes in as the defensive coordinator. So we don't know if their defense is going to be better. If that defense is better, USC by the end of the season could be a very good team. We don't know what the quarterback situation is going to be. We're assuming it's going to be Miller Moss. He looked awesome in the bowl game. But I tend to give Lincoln Riley offenses the benefit of the doubt. So it could be that USC is pretty good by that point. But we're just assuming that they're not going to be great. I don't think we should make that assumption, especially because that's an end of the year game. What'll be really interesting, I think, is let's say Notre Dame drops the A&M game, drops the Florida State game, and they sit 10-1 going to the Coliseum on the last day of the season. That's going to be an incredible game. Even if USC hasn't been that great in its first year in the Big Ten, having the ability to spoil Notre Dame's playoff chances potentially, and that's going to be one of those big scoreboard watching games probably around the country, because anybody else who's in for an at-large spot but kind of on the edge is going to be watching that. The truth says we're also assuming the USC defense is going to be at least competent. We don't need 2021 Georgia. Just limit teams to 30 points. Agreed. It doesn't have to be a massive improvement. An improvement to baseline competency would be that probably would be a massive improvement over what we've seen at USC the past 2 years. So, yeah, I think we're going to have to reserve judgment on the Trojans until we actually get to see them play. They open against LSU. And as we've said, that LSU offense, I'm not that worried about them reloading. They've got Garrett Nussmeier. I think CJ Daniels, Kyron Lacey, going to be able to maybe not completely replace what you got from Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas, but they're going to be pretty good. They're also going to be able to run the ball with that offensive line. So off the bat, we'll get a better idea of where USC is defensively. If LSU just runs through them for 50 points, then maybe we revise that assumption at the end of the season. But how fun would that be if Notre Dame at the end of the year is playing for a playoff berth at USC? It would be especially fun if USC is also in the mix for an at-large. That's a ratings bonanza right there. But that's the part of the new playoff that really excites me. The possibility of games like that. Because that matchup in the 4-team system, if Notre Dame has dropped one to A&M or Florida State with this schedule, I don't know that Notre Dame's still in the mix for a spot in the 4-team playoff at that point. Maybe they are. It depends on what everybody else has done. But they're definitely in the mix for a spot in the 12-team playoff. And I think that could be a truly fun way to end the season. Thank you so much for watching. Just a reminder, subscribe to this channel right here so you never miss an episode of Andy Staples on 3. And oh, by the way, watch all the other great videos on the On3 Sports YouTube channel.